welcome back to Granny Charlotte's Adventure Stories. Today we're going to be reading Chapter 11 of Little Pilgrim's Progress. And of course we have vocabulary words, but even before that, I wanted to give a shout out to one of my fans, one of my little subscriber buddies, and his name is Asher. Hi Asher! It was fun getting to see you the other day, and it was fun that you recognized Granny Charlotte. So enjoy this chapter, and let's get to those vocabulary words. Our first word is discomfort. Discomfort. When a person feels pain, or is worried, or nervous, or bothered, or anxious, just not okay. Discomfort. Our second word is riot. A riot is when a group of people behave in a violent way. They get mad, they're mean, or they lose control of their feelings and get angry. In a group, that's called a riot. And then we have justice. Justice is making sure that the laws are followed correctly. Justice. Let's get reading. Now remember, Christian just caught up with Faithful, his little friend. The two boys were very pleased to see each other, for they had been friends when they were living in the city of destruction. Faithful had always been quiet and thoughtful, and he and little Christian had sometimes talked together about the king's book and the wonderful stories that the strangers had told them. "I'm glad I have caught up with you," said Christian. "It will be much nicer to travel together." "I meant to come all the way with you," replied Faithful, "but you went off so suddenly that I did not know until you were gone." "How long did you stay in the city?" "Only 2 or 3 days. After you left, the boys talked a great deal about the king's messages, but I don't think they really believed them." "What did they say to Pliable?" "Oh, they soon found out where he had been, for he was covered all over with mud when he came back. They laughed at him, and they would not let him play with them." "They need not have laughed at him," said little Christian. "They wouldn't come." "No, but they teased him for turning back at the first bit of trouble he came to. I met him the day after, and I was going to ask him about you, but he crossed over the street and pretended he didn't even see me." "I'm very sorry," said Christian. "I thought he would be a real pilgrim, and it was a pity that he went home again. Now tell me all that has happened to you." "I did not fall into the slough," said Faithful, "but I met a girl named Pleasure before I came to the wicket gate. She is a servant in the wicked prince's palace, and when she saw where I was going, she tried to make me go back with her. I was afraid she would make me, for she was tall and strong, but I would not listen to what she said, and at last she told me I was a stupid boy and not worth speaking to." Little Christian remembered how he had turned aside when Worldly deceived him, and he said, "You may be very glad you did not listen to her. Did you meet anyone else?" "Not for some time. When I came to the Hill of Difficulty, I saw a very old man sitting by the side of the road. He asked me whether I was going to the Celestial City, and he said I had much better come and live with him, for he would be good to me, and when he died, I should have all his riches. He was so pleasant that I could not help listening to him, and he almost persuaded me to go with him." "Oh," cried little Christian, "he would have taken you to the wicked prince." "Yes, I am sure he would have. I was just ready to turn back, but I looked up and saw that he was smiling to himself. Then it came into my mind that perhaps he was one of the wicked king's servants. So I said, 'I will not go.' Then he was very angry and told me he would send someone after me to hurt me. However, I escaped from him and went up the hill." "Did he send anyone?" asked Christian. "Yes, Just when I was passing that little arbor, I heard someone coming quickly behind me. It was one of the king's servants, and he said he had come to punish me for listening to the old man. His name was Justice, and I thought he would have killed me with his rod. But a man came with a gentle face, and he told Justice not to strike me again. I did not know who it was at first, but when he was going up the hill, I saw the marks on his feet, and I am sure it must have been our dear prince himself. I have heard about Justice, said Christian, but the prince does not let him punish the pilgrims too much. Did you not see the palace at the top of the hill? Yes, and the lions too. They were asleep, and it was quite early, so I thought it was better to just go on my way. The porter told me he had seen you. I wish you had stayed at the palace. The people are so kind. Did you meet anyone in the valley? I met Discontent there, and he was very tiresome indeed. You did not meet Self? No, I did, said Christian, and he very nearly killed me. Do you remember when he got into that battle with Self? Self almost did kill little Christian. The boys went on, talking happily together until they came to a part of the plain in which the way of the king was wider than usual. Faithful happened to turn his head, and he saw that another boy was walking on the opposite side of the road. He was a fine-looking lad, and Faithful thought that he might be a pleasant companion, so he said, "Are you going to the Celestial City?" The boy answered, "Yes." "Then let us walk together," said Faithful. "We are all traveling the same way." "I shall like that very much," replied the boy, and he crossed over the road and began to talk with Faithful. He had a great deal to say about the king and his servants and his laws, and little Faithful felt quite pleased to think of having a new friend who was so good and clever. Presently he waited for Christian, who was walking a little behind them, and whispered, "Is he not a nice boy? I am sure he must be a very good pilgrim." Little Christian smiled. "Don't you know who he is?" he asked. "No," said Faithful. "I've not seen him before." "Haven't you? Why, he lives in our city. His name is Talkative. He often pretends to be a pilgrim just to amuse himself, but I did not know that he ever came as far as this." "Is he a bad pilgrim then?" "I'm afraid he does not love the king," said Christian, "but you will soon find out." Then Faithful ran on again and walked by the side of Talkative. "Perhaps," thought the little pilgrim, "he may not be quite so bad as Christian thinks, and we may be able to persuade him to go with us." But the more the boy talked, the less Faithful liked him, and at last he became quite sure that they could never be friends. It was plain that Talkative was very vain and foolish, and although he praised the king and said how delightful it was to be his servant, Faithful could see that he had no real wish to enter the Celestial City, and that he was only pretending to be a pilgrim for the sake of amusing himself. Faithful listened quietly for some time while his companion talked about the king's goodness, and then he said, "I suppose you are very careful to obey all the king's laws?" Talkative blushed, for he knew he always did just what he liked, although he was very ready to tell his friends what the king had commanded them to do. He felt vexed and upset with little Faithful for asking him such a question, and answered crossly, "I don't see that it matters to you." "I think it does matter," replied Faithful. "If you talk so much about loving the king, you ought to serve him very well indeed." "How do you know that I don't serve him?" returned Talkative. "I am not sure," said Faithful, "but I am afraid you don't." "I wonder what a little fellow like you has to do with correcting me," cried Talkative in an angry tone. I am much older than you are." "I didn't mean to correct you at all, but I was not sure if you were a real pilgrim." "A real pilgrim? Of course I am! But I know exactly how it is. Christian told you a lot of stories about me when you ran back to speak to him, and I suppose you believe them all." Faithful did not know what to say, for he could see that Talkative was very angry indeed, so he walked on quietly without speaking. "I don't care at all," said Talkative presently. "If you choose to believe bad things about me, it's your fault, not mine. But I think you are a very rude, disagreeable little boy, and I don't wish to talk to you anymore. You can just walk by yourself and leave me to do as I like." He seemed so angry that Faithful made no answer. He let him go on his way alone and waited for Christian, who soon came up to him. "Never mind," said Christian when he heard what had happened. "I am glad he has not stayed with us, for I don't think he would have done us any good." Well, soon after they had parted from Talkative, the two little pilgrims came to a wide and desolate plain. No trees grew up on it, and there were no flowers among the short, dry grass. The way of the king went straight across it, and as Christian looked forward, he felt glad that he was not alone, for the path looked long and dreary. But with Faithful for a companion, the time passed quickly, and toward the close of the afternoon, the tired children were glad to find that they were not very far from the border of the plain. Beyond it, the country appeared green and beautiful, and Christian hoped that they might soon come to another one of the king's houses where they would be allowed to rest until the morning. Presently, Faithful thought he heard footsteps behind him, and looking back, he saw someone whose face seemed like that of an old friend. He stood still for a minute, and then he cried out, "Oh, Christian! Christian! Do you see who's coming after us?" Christian turned and clapped his hands for joy. "It is Evangelist!" he exclaimed. How pleased the boys were to see their good friend once more. Evangelist had much to hear, and he smiled with eagerness while the little pilgrims told him of all they had seen and done. "The king has been very good to you," he said at length. "You have met with some enemies and some troubles, but he has helped you always, and he will help you still if you trust in him." "I am sure he will," said Christian. Faithful only clasped his fingers a little more tightly around those of Evangelist, for he felt shy and half afraid to speak. But Evangelist knew that he loved and trusted the king with all his heart, and that he would be quite as brave as Christian if the servants of the wicked prince were to attack him. "Will you tell us more about the road?" asked Christian. "Will it be easier now, or are there some other dreadful places to pass through?" Evangelist looked grave. "I came to meet you here," he answered, "because very soon you will reach the gates of a great city that belongs to the wicked prince. It is a beautiful city, full of all kinds of pleasant things, and many pilgrims, when they enter it, are tempted to stay there instead of going on their journey. I do not wish you to be so foolish, so I have come to warn you about it." "Why must we pass through it?" said Faithful. "Well, the wicked prince ordered it to be built on both sides of the king's way, so that pilgrims cannot possibly get to the celestial city without passing through the very middle of it." "What shall we do then?" "You must walk quietly among the streets. Do not stop to look at the beautiful things in the shops and in the market, and do not let the children persuade you to play with them. Sometimes the pilgrims are not much troubled by the townspeople, and sometimes they are treated very cruelly." "Would they kill us, do you think?" asked Christian. "They may perhaps put you in prison," replied Evangelist. "And they have often been wicked enough to kill people who would not serve their prince. But do not be afraid. If you have to die there, the king will send his angels, and they will carry you at once to the celestial city, and you will have no more trouble or pain forever. Here's a pic of a pilgrim who was put in prison in this horrible, wicked city. This city is called Vanity Fair. The sun was just setting when Evangelist told the children goodbye, and before its light had faded away, they saw in the distance the walls and gates of a great and strong city. "Are you afraid?" said little Christian. "Not very much," answered Faithful. "The king will take care of us, and you have your good armor." "Yes, I do wish that you had stayed at the palace, Beautiful. Then you would have had some armor too." "Never mind," said Faithful. "I shall keep close to you, and if the people do kill me, there will be no more enemies to fight." He put his hand in Christian's, and Christian thought of the king and tried not to feel frightened. But he was only a little boy, and as he passed under the wide archway and heard the heavy gates close behind him, he whispered to Faithful, "I should like Evangelist to be taking hold of my hand now." And Faithful said, "Yes, perhaps if we had asked him, he would have gone through the city with us. What a pity we did not think of that." And that concludes our reading for today. Thank you for joining me. Now, brush your teeth, wash your hands, and let's have a nice chip. Today, I'm having pina colada. That means pineapple coconut. See you tomorrow.